and welcome to Now is the Time. I'm Meri Crouley. On today's program, we're going to be talking about a subject that some of you might be a little bit intimidated about: sexual trafficking and satanic ritual abuse. You know, they say that since Donald Trump took office, over 3,000 pedophiles belonging to an elite pedophile sex trafficking ring were arrested since he took office. It's an international ring that actually, human trafficking is often managed by satanic blood rituals entangled in abusive practices of pedophilia and torture of women and children. You know, these are just such bizarre things that are going on. In the last 2 years, there's been 11 former or current mayors that have literally been involved with torture and sexualization of children. And in fact, the mayor of Seattle, just yesterday, his name was, Seattle Mayor Ed Murray resigned on Wednesday after a fifth man accused him of molestation as a child. And there's one other thing that I wanted to say. Former governor of Ohio, Mayor Richard Keenan, he was a Democrat, he was handed a life sentence in April of 2017 after he pled guilty to repeatedly raping a 4-year-old girl, which he tried to say it was consensual. On today's program, I have Dr. Ken R. Unger, who we're going to be talking about sex trafficking and pedophiliism, and also SRA, or satanic ritual abuse. You know, some of you might be thinking this sounds unbelievable, and I used to think this way, but let me tell you, more and more, as the swamp is being drained, we're finding out that this deals with high up levels of people in government and in the entertainment industry. In June of this year, there was over 238 arrests that were done in Hollywood that dealt with well-known names, people high up in government, and even some clergy members. Welcome to the program, Ken.
Thank you, Mary. I'm glad to be here. I'm sorry that we're talking about such an awful thing, but we've got to talk about it. It has to be exposed, and it has to be brought to light. It's as old as religion. It's as old as bad religion. It's as old as satanic religion. It's in every community, and it's in high places in government, entertainment, and high finance. That's why people are so angry amongst the elite at Donald J. Trump. Well,
you know, a couple weeks ago, I interviewed Liz Crokin, that she was on my show, and she's an investigative journalist that has worked with the White House, press corps. She worked with the Chicago Tribune, and she's worked with a number of people over the last 20 years. And we interviewed her. You can watch that in some of the former shows, but she was saying that she believes a third of people in Congress or in the politics are involved in this.
Well, as crazy as that sounds, part of the strategy of the elite is to corrupt people, to get them to do these things. Then they can be controlled and manipulated, and they corrupt them with sex, drugs, rock and roll, money, and the worst of things, the sacrifice of children. It's like the mafia. Once you've committed a murder, you're in, but you also can't leave. And the same thing happens with politics. In fact, I don't know if it's true, but I do know that the Clintons went to some place called Pedo Island or Lolita Island in the Caribbean. And rumor has it that the Israeli Mossad, their secret service, actually had cameras all over that place filming elite people from all over the world so that they could blackmail them and corrupt them and make them do what they wanted them to do.
Well, it's interesting you're talking about this. Jeffrey Epstein's island, that was on St. James in the Caribbean. And I'm sure that when this Hurricane Irma came through there, that was one of the islands that got hit. So God is shaking everything that can be shaken. And I believe that, there comes a time that enough is enough. And I believe that the sin and the stench in the world today, in particular with human trafficking, which is modern day slavery, that they say it's a $32 billion a year industry, that over 30 million people on the planet, 800,000 people right in the United States alone, right in our borders. These are not people brought in. They're groomed right here in the United States, and the internet is one of the largest ways now that they're doing this through. So if you think your child is safe, you know, when you let little Johnny or Susie on the computer, you really need to sit down with them and have a talk with them, because these pedophiles and molesters aren't going to come out and say, oh, we're evil people, we want to do you wrong. No, they're going to come out and pretend that they're somebody different than they are.
Look at Anthony Weiner, who was married to Huma Abedin, who was presidential candidate Clinton's key person, and he was doing that. And he also recorded a lot of things in his laptop so that he could exonerate himself and have a way out. But this is happening all over the world.
Well, you know, in fact, you know what happened with this Steve Scalise that, you know, they shot at and tried to murder. He actually was bringing forth legislation that was coming against major pedophile rings.
And Michael Flynn, who Trump had to fire, and his son were intent upon exposing this. That's why the media and the elite went after him so aggressively to discredit him, so that Trump really had no choice but to have to get rid of him. But it's because, the backstory is, it's because they were going to expose it in glaring lights. Ironically, I believe that all of their attempt now to bring those guys into the Mueller investigation will actually bring to the surface and to the light what they were doing. So the elite are going to try and ruin him and ruin Trump, and in fact, I believe they'll expose themselves in the process.
Well, it isn't interesting with 3,000, busts of these pedophile rings that a lot of them are doing satanic ritual abuse. And you could say, who in their right mind would do such a horrific thing to a little child? They're doing it for power. You can Google this stuff on YouTube. You can go to YouTube and Google SRA, or satanic ritual abuse. Google the molestation, sex trafficking. It's all out there. With the internet now, and with YouTube and Facebook, they can't keep it hidden. And so it's coming to light more and more. I just was watching a program, because I'm doing a documentary on this called Freedom Cry, and God spoke to me to research this. There's other documentaries about this.
Sure.
But it was talking about in England that what they usually do is they go after these boys that are abandoned, in orphanages or whatever. And it was talking about how some of the House of Commons, some of these high-up lords, were actually, taking these young boys and look like they were helping them, only to be raping and molesting them, sometimes under the practices of Luciferian type of practices. Now, you've been involved with this, Dr. Ken, and
yes.
You actually have, much history in working with satanic ritual abuse survivors.
You're right. I stumbled into it. I have a reputation of being able to help impossible cases. And one morning I asked the Lord, did I really help that many impossible cases? And there were over 40 people that were brought to me that nobody could help. And one was a lady who her pastor and her psychotherapist didn't know how to help her. And her problem sounds simple, she decided to do away with sugar and white flour in her diet, and all these terrible emotions began to come up. She'd been self-medicating for years and didn't know it. So she came to see me, and I went to lead her into a very simple meditation. Now, this is a suburban housewife, upper middle class, attractive, church-going, and she comes to see me, and she's so distraught that I intuitively led her in to a simple meditation to calm her down. And I put on some music with a babbling brook and some soft music, and I had her imagine herself going into a beautiful place in the woods, and she flipped out. She came unglued. And she started thrashing about on the chair, trying to rip off her arm. When I got her calmed down, I said, what was that? She said, don't you know? And I said, no. She said, when you took me into the woods, all my memories came back. And I said, memories of what? She said, I remembered that I had been groomed to be high priestess of a satanic cult. Do you know what that means? I said, no. She said, the high priestess has sex with the high priest, delivers a baby, and then sacrifices it to Satan by her own hand. And I said, did you do that? And she said, yes. And I said, is that why you were trying to rip off your arm? She said, yes. I deserve to die. So I said, no, Jesus died for you. In 3 sessions, I was able to help her heal. But Mary, the story to me was so I was so incredulous. I called up a friend of mine who I knew worked with these people for years. And I said, could this really have happened? She said, sadly, Ken, I've heard many such stories. Yes, it could.
Well, in fact, back in the, as I've been researching this subject, back in the, I don't know, the 70s or something, Rosemary's Baby came out, a movie with Mia Farrow. And Roman Polanski, of course, isn't it interesting that he is a pedophile that actually, escaped and went over to another country. But Rosemary's Baby very much documents that whole scenario. And this is happening. It's a proven thing. That's why the mainstream media is trying to cover it up, because it deals with globalists and elites around the world that now the swamp is being drained and it's being exposed. And once one goes down, it's like a web.
Domino.
It's a domino effect. Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening. And, in the past, there's been people that have even been murdered with this kind of, that have been finding out stuff. You can Google the Conspiracy of Silence documentary that was supposed to come out in 1994, dealing with a man named Lawrence King, that actually was a darling of the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And he was actually taking boys from Boys Town in Omaha and abusing them, and they were all set to run this documentary. People were being murdered. The investigator, his plane blew apart. A couple of the people ended up getting killed and murdered. I'm telling you, this stuff is really dark and it's really deep. And, one thing that I've learned is we can't be afraid of them. See, what happens if you're afraid of them, that's how the devil gets power, is fear. And you know what fear is? It's false evidence appearing real. And if we perish, we perish. You know what? If we get killed, we get killed. But you know what? Let the truth be known that God is exposing this.
No, you're right. You're right. And that's why these people hate our president so much, is because he's fearless. And he's willing to go into the teeth of Satan to go after these people. And thank God he is, because, Mary, this is as old as demonic religion. It's as old as religion. And I remember as I began to burrow into this and discover that there were elite people doing this, I couldn't understand why. And then all of a sudden it made sense to me. Do you remember when Jesus had a crowd of people following him? And I think Jesus was a little suspicious of popularity. And he said, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you'll have no part of me. And the people were appalled because they thought that he was advocating what? Satanic abuse.
Cannibalism.
Exactly, because the demons, the demonic gods, Baal, etc., Moloch, demanded the children be sacrificed. And in their rituals, they would eat the beating heart of the baby would be cut out. Why an infant like that? And then they would drink the blood. Why an infant? Because it's counterfeit communion. It's an attempt to find power through innocence, and it's perverted and distorted in a satanic way. If we have time, I'll tell you a story about Anton LaVey, but you go ahead and tell me what you want to talk about.
Well, the thing is, too, as I've been studying this is really dark, but it goes on more than you know. And there's even on this Jeffrey Epstein's island that I believe was wiped out, there was a a place that's blocked out that even Google Maps you can't see.
That's right.
And they think that that might be the place where they're actually doing, satanic ritual.
People who had been there said that that's exactly what it was. It was a temple where they were doing satanic rituals, apparently, according to this person who was there and saw it.
Now, Anton LaVey, he was, the head of the Church of Satan.
Yep, author of the Satanic Bible.
Okay, so tell us the story about him.
Well, I have a friend who did one of my healing seminars, and it was a powerful seminar. And shortly after that, he retired to Northern California. Well, Bohemian Grove is up there. So was Anton LaVey's Church of Satan. Well,
And now, just let me interrupt you. Bohemian Grove. That's a place that's actually started to come out more and more. Alex Jones of InfoWars has been talking about it. What is Bohemian Grove?
well, it's where the elite from all over the world congregate, supposedly for some sort of like a boys' club camp out. But a lot of people believe, and Alex Jones exposed some of that before he got run off the property, that it's actually a place where they're doing satanic rituals.
Okay, so now let's go back to what you were saying about Bohemian Grove and up with San Francisco.
Well, so my friend this pastor retired and was just a member of a church in Northern California. Well, a young woman came there and wanted deliverance. And so they ministered deliverance, not knowing it was Anton LaVey's daughter. LaVey was furious and declared war on the church, on that particular church. And my friend told me that he would go out in the morning and he would find dead animals that had been sacrificed in front of his house. He told me he would sit in his office and watch people shapeshift. And this guy looks like an insurance salesman. This guy is not a tin hat flake at all.
So when you say shapeshift, what is that? They start turning into a different being?
Reptilian and like serpents. And he'd blink and he'd watch this happen. So this spiritual war took place between the pastor, not my friend, but the senior pastor and LaVey. And interestingly, LaVey, at some point, the only Christian he trusted was a neighbor. And LaVey ended up dying in this conflict, having a near-death experience, seeing himself go to hell, and came back and begged for his neighbor to help him, but his neighbor was out of town. He couldn't find him. So you can actually, maybe they've taken him down now because they're taking some of this stuff down, but you used to be able to see a video of all of this story and how LaVey wanted not to go to hell and was desperately trying to find a way to really trust somebody to lead him to Jesus. And then he died, and nobody knows if he actually did come to Jesus or if he didn't.
People watching this show right now, you might be thinking, this just seems so far out. But let me tell you, there's well-known people right now. There's a young man who is actually a very well-known singer. I just feel that the Lord doesn't want me to bring his name out. But he was on tour, and halfway through, he canceled his concert tour. Now, I had heard that he was told and shown a young boy and said, here, in order to go to the next level, instead of just being a millionaire, you can go to the billionaire level. You have to go and, have sex with this young boy. And, this guy's a Christian, this singer, and he was appalled by it and actually canceled his tour. They say that actually Chris Cornell of Soundgarden and the guy from Linkin Park, they both were supposedly committed suicide. But they were getting ready, I heard, to expose some type of pedophile ring. A lot of these people are dying that are putting light on this subject, and it looks like a suicide.
Let's create a new name for it. It's pedicide. Let's call it pedicide, because anybody who tries to expose this faces the possibility of being killed. WikiLeaks revealed this Vault 7 from the CIA that showed they can now take control of your car and make it kill you. They can take control of your car and cause it to accelerate to 100 miles an hour so it's out of control. That was revealed by WikiLeaks as our own CIA having the capacity to do that. Why do they want that? That's the dark, dark bottom of the pit. The black ops, off-budget parts of the intelligence community that cover up by committing murders, like Seth Rich in all likelihood was murdered, and numerous other people to cover up. And people say, oh, that's not true. I would challenge anybody to Google Clinton Chronicles or Clinton murders and look at the names of the people who were killed, how they were killed, when they were killed, and what they were doing when they died, when their plane crashed, when they committed suicide using the wrong hand, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Well, and this is the thing. God doesn't want us to be afraid because, you know, God says we've already won. You know, when Jesus died at Calvary, he said it is finished. So what God is doing is exposing the evil works of darkness. And so that's why, you know, when I asked Liz, what can we do? And she said, first of all, pray. But secondly, she said, we need to tell other people about this. Share this program. Because once you have knowledge, you have power. And then they can't keep you in the dark anymore. And that's why Jesus even says, you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
That's right. I want to go on record, and I'm sure you do too. I have no intention of ever committing suicide. If anybody ever tells you I did, they're lying. And I don't have a car that's new enough for them to control it. And there are ways. There are ways. There was a pastor who was speaking out about some of these things. Somebody from the FBI came to visit him. He said, look, I'm a Christian too. I'm warning you. They'll get you. He said, I'm still going to say what I say. Next thing you know, his car was T-boned. They didn't kill him, but they wrecked his car. They took down the license plate, all of the information, blah, blah, blah. The car, the person, the driver didn't exist. He was T-boned by somebody who was covering up and trying to kill him to tell him to shut up. He was on television saying, on YouTube saying, I'm not going to shut up.
Well, and that's why if you can't be intimidated, you know, Andrew Breitbart, you know, in 2012 was walking home after he had just tweeted out about John Podesta, about molestation. And it was no sooner as he was walking home, he had a supposed heart attack. And, you know, people aren't stupid anymore. And so, Ken, as we're closing out the show, because we just have a couple more minutes left, what would you just like to say briefly to the people, you know, as, you know, there is hope in all of this. The swamp is being drained. People are waking up. People are being arrested. These people are getting judgment and justice for what they've done.
The hope that I would give is a biblical hope, and the biblical hope is that those who commit righteousness, God will protect. No weapon formed against you will prosper. Those who commit evil cannot hide. God sees them where they are, no matter what they do. I mean, sure, it'd be smart for them to get out of the country and go someplace because they can escape for a while, but ultimately they will be brought to justice. God will prevail. He's not tolerating this. He has declared war. He has seen that Donald J. Trump got elected 45th president, like Cyrus in Isaiah 45. And God is against them. Your arms are too short to fight with God.
Well, thanks for coming on the program, Ken, and thanks for watching Now Is the Time. You know, the Word of God says, if God be for us, who can be against us? And, you know, God is with us. We don't have to be afraid. We have to use wisdom, but we cannot be afraid. And let me speak to those of you who are doing some of these practices. You can run, but you cannot hide. God is saying it's time for you to abide. And he heard the voices of those who had cried. And he even saw when they took their last breath and they died. And now the Lord says, it's enough of your lies, because God, he is about to despise. And the lies, he says, surprise, surprise. The Lord said, this is the greatest show on earth that's getting ready to happen. And God is going to reveal and release the broken and the prisoners in darkness and chains, and they will no longer be intimidated or go insane. Now is a point that God is going to bring everything to the light, and we're going to wear his ring. Just know that this is the time that God is going to reveal everything. So if you're watching today and you were blessed by this show, please, you can bring a donation to our website, MeriCrouley.com. You should see it on the screen, because it takes money to get this show on the air, and I'd appreciate it. Right now, we're getting ready to put on some galas, some fundraising for my fundraiser, Freedom Cry, and I'm in need of about $10,000. So I know, a lot of times we ask, but, it says, ask and you shall receive. If you donate at least $50 or more, I will send you a copy of my book, When God Speaks. And also a beautiful necklace, a cross necklace that I was going to bring here with me today and actually forgot. But listen, thanks for watching. Now is the time. We know that now is the time that God is going to bring forth justice and liberty for everyone in the world who love and call upon his name. See you next week.